Reddit, what's your favorite no freaking way story? My sister was driving down the street at 45 miles per hour with her windows open and a deer ran into the street. Instead of hitting this deer, the deer jumped into her car through the window, landed with its head in the footpart of the passenger side seat and its butt on the headrest. The deer was freaked the frick out and with its butt in the air, proceeded to crap all over the car. She obviously pulled over. Several people stopped to help and asked her where the deer was. She just stood there screaming, "IT's in the car, IT's in the car." A helpful man opened the door, pulled the deer out, and the deer bounded off like nothing happened. For imagery, she was driving a late 90s Ford Escort at the time. No one believes this story, but it is 100% true. I'm willing to believe this only because I know somebody who had a deer impaled on their fence. They pulled it off, then it just bounded into the sunset. My roommate had a huge fish tank with 4 cichlids in it. One of them, the pink one, was really freaking mean and used to pick on the other ones. I hated him. One night, I had a dream that I caught him with a net, threw him in a pan with some butter, fried him up, and ate him. The next morning I walked by the fish tank, looked in to discover that the pink one was gone. I freaked out and looked all over the tank for him. He's nowhere to be found. When my roommate got home from work, I told him about my dream and that the pink cichlid is missing. He looked at me, visibly shaken, and said, "Dude, I'm gonna start locking my bedroom door at night." Days and weeks go by. I'm truly disturbed that I'm capable of sleep eating my roommate's pets. Finally, I'm so overcome with anxiety that I decide to scour the tank, CSI style, looking for clues. I press my face against every square inch of the tank, desperate to salvage a shred of sanity. After what must have been at least an hour, something tiny catches my eye under a large piece of coral in the back corner. I reached in and pulled out the coral only to discover the bones of the pink cichlid. It had been wedged between the rocks and the coral on the bottom of the tank. Somehow the other 3 cichlids had murdered the pink one and telepathically framed me for it. Not only did they frame me, they got me to confess. That was a thoroughly enjoyable read. Congrats for restoring peace in cichlid land. Good sir. One winter, I went sledding down a popular hill in my hometown with my brother and his wife. At the bottom of the hill, there's a frozen pond. My sister-in-law hopped on the back of my sled, sitting backwards, and we went down together. Due to the extra mass, we started going way faster than I'd expected. When I noticed we were heading right toward a little kid, I just couldn't maneuver out of the way, so I leaned forward and scooped the kid up, holding him up like Simba. Then I realized we were still about to sled into a frozen pond, so I bailed out and held the kid as high over my head as I could. I stood up, set the kid down, and looked around for his parents. When I saw a big dude coming at me, I was like, oh crap, here we go. Then he got closer and I realized it was of my closest friends, and that the kid I ran into was his son who I babysit regularly. I thought to myself, no freaking way, and gave him a big hug. The kid said he thought it was awesome. When I was 17, I worked for a excavation demolition company for the summer. We were gutting an old mill in New Hampshire to turn into high-end lofts. One of the workers was standing on the top of some scaffold about 12-15 feet up using a handheld bandsaw to cut through a large pipe. As he was cutting, a strap supporting the pipe broke, letting it drop down and pinch the blade. This made the saw shoot back towards him and push him off the scaffold. This guy did a complete freaking backflip while holding a working saw from over 10 feet up. He landed on his feet, saw still running. Everyone stopped and stared at him for about 5 seconds before we went back to work. TLDR. I worked with a redneck Jackie Chan in New Hampshire, who does backflips with power tools. So I'm spending the summer on Nantucket. Friends of mine introduced me to a guy named Robbie. He and I hit it off. It's like instant bro love. We spend days kicking it, smoking bowls and philosophizing. Then he leaves and we lose touch. Years go by. I'm on a subway in New York. This guy I sorta recognize is on the same car. He comes over and say hi, but it's my stop and so I get off. The instant the doors close, I remember who he is. It's Robbie Crap. The subway pulls away and he's gone. Years go by. I'm living in LA and it's my friend Leslie's birthday at some club down on Pico. We pull up to the front door. I hop out and a guy smoking a cigarette outside says, "Hey, you, it's goddamn Robbie. We're best friends ever since and he was best man at my wedding." First time I've ever heard of the groom doubling as the best man. But hey, I'm happy for you guys. My friend, John, is a paramedic and firefighter. He also teaches and certifies first aid CPR. Now, for those that don't know, CPR is not very effective. It has a very low success rate, unless initiated soon after an incident, which is why everyone should learn CPR, even after revival. Many people have serious health effects. One day, John gets into a pretty bad car accident and goes into cardiac arrest. The paramedics and police are dispatched. The officer first on scene knows CPR and initiates chest compression on John. John is revived, and although suffered severe memory loss, is well. The kicker? John taught the officer CPR the week prior to the incident. That's pretty amazing. Glad to hear John is doing well. Kudos to the officer for reacting so quickly. A lot of people learn CPR, but are too scared to actually do it or they do it incorrectly when it's required. Also, this shows John is a good instructor. I was at a car show and I was raising my hand so my parents could see I was still next to the old Cadillac Batmobile. Next thing I know, someone has high-fived me. I look over and it was Adam West. He winked, smiled, and walked away to do more signings or something. It was glorious. I would never wash that hand again, no. A friend of an old roommate of mine was at the airport a few years ago and saw Bill Nye the fricking science guy at the terminal next to his. Eventually, he got up the courage to talk to him, but it was nothing more than small chat and praise. Bill's plane gets called so the kid leaves him be and sits back down trying to digest how cool his life just became, but a few minutes go by and all of a sudden he hears his name called. Bill Nye is standing at the gate and calls out, "Hey kid, science rules," then boards the plane. I want Bill Nye to replace the Bill Murray stories. Here's mine. I was walking my older dog one night around 10 PM. I had him off leash since it was late and we were in a neighborhood. No one to bother. I kept track of him for poo duty as he sniffed around and we were approaching an intersection. The house we were walking along was 20 feet from the sidewalk, where I was, and was edged by very large juniper bushes which he was checking out. Suddenly he stopped and dove into a bush. This was odd considering he was nearing 10 years old and although he's active, he's not crazy like that note lab husky mutt for reference. Out of the bush comes some sort of snarl scream and all I could think was crap. He got a raccoon and out leaps a immature mountain lion, at least 20% larger than my dog. It runs off down the road, and I stand there, terrified, yelling no freaking way as he comes back to me wagging butt like he's the greatest dog ever, which is very likely considering that cat was much bigger than me. It was probably his most well-earned rawhide bone he's ever earned. You sick frick, after he scared away a mountain lion. I was deployed in Iraq, and was out on a convoy on deck 31, 2007. Long story short, I unknowingly pee on an IED, which exploded 30 seconds after I walked away. This was on my birthday. TL. DR. Trudge trudge pee trudge trudge boom. So a good friend of mine is in an airport in Canada in a bookshop waiting to get the flight back to the UK with his family. About 7/8 at a time. Anyway, across the bookshop is Ian McKellen Gandalf. And my friend and his brother really loved Lord of the Rings at the time. They go over to him and he looks over, realizes that they have recognized him and right then and there does an impromptu rendition of the Bridge of Khazad scene complete with "You shall not pass" right in the middle of a crowded airport. He then gives them autographs. How's the for no freaking way? My girlfriend and I were traveling in Italy and met this nice Australian girl on the train from Rome to Naples. We chatted a bit and learned that she had just left her friend in North Africa to start traveling on her own. Fast forward 2 weeks and my girlfriend and I are now on a bus from Brasov, Romania to Bucharest, and we ended up randomly meeting the Australian girl's friend that was left in North Africa. My former English teacher went camping with his friends. They were riding on a bus and he decides to take a nap. When he woke up, there was a Coke can floating in the air. So he reaches out to grab it, and when he comes to a little bit his friends are freaking the frick out. Why? Because his friend dropped his soda can and my English teacher woke up and caught it. Dang. Must have had quick reaction time due to the increased brain activity and sleep. N had sleeping ninja reflexes. Flying 1,100 miles for an interview. I hear someone across the aisle yell my name. I'm thinking, that voice sounds familiar. Turns out it was one of my good friends from college. I'm thinking no freaking way he got an interview the same time I did. And we stayed next door at the same hotel the night before the interview. And now we're housemates. Both got the job. The end. Once, waiting in line at a restaurant, I see the guy in front of me. I think I recognize him, but I don't know what from. The entire time I am waiting, I am searching in my brain as to why I knew him. He turns to me and says, "Do I know you?" We both stood there for a good 10 minutes, going through high schools, workplaces, friends, etc. Anything to find out why we knew each other. As far as we could tell, though, there is no reason at all we should have ever met before. But we both clearly recognized each other. To this day, no clue. Drugs. A while ago, my dad and I had a driver pick us up from San Francisco airport to drive us home. Since there was a lot of traffic, we had a bunch of time to talk and shoot the crap. Turned out that the driver's daughter was the fiancée of my dad's nephew, my cousin, who both live in Cleveland. We attended the wedding a few months later and again reconnected with the driver while there. We started talking some more, and then he introduced us to his wife. Apparently, her and my dad went to the same high school, graduated the same year, and even dated for a few months. This was in a very small suburban town outside of Cleveland. Small world, indeed. This was in a very small suburban town. No, pretty sure that's the explanation right there. The day after I proposed to my wife we were at the Science Fiction Museum in Seattle, WA. There is an exhibit that is a giant tumbler full of yellow beads, like thousands of yellow beads, and one black one. It is meant to illustrate the unlikelihood of finding life in the universe. I called her over to tell her how cool it was, and she just points at it casually and says, "There's the black one," and she has continued to amaze me every day since. Good times. What an elegant metaphor. I've got two, but I'll leave the other for later. First, when I was 16, my mom took me to NYC for my birthday. We left on a Wednesday and were flying back Saturday afternoon so I could go to school on Monday and my mom could watch my baby sister while my stepdad went back to work. On Saturday, we get on the plane. It rolls out of the tarmac, and we sit there for approximately 4 hours without moving and without an explanation. The plane then took us back to the gate and said they had some protocol that prevented them from keeping us on the tarmac any longer, and the flight was cancelled. Well, my mom and I were freaked out, to say the least, as it was pretty imperative that we get home as soon as possible. My poor stepdad is not very self-reliant. All the passengers rushed off the plane and got in a line to figure out alternatives. And my mom and I start bitching about our situation. We mention my baby sister, who has Down syndrome, and the lady behind us in line butts in and says she has a brother with mental retardation as well. This leads to us chatting in line and talking about what bulls that airline was. After a while, the woman, who was with two friends and her niece, nonchalantly mentions that she has a private jet and was only flying home on that airline to use up frequent flyer miles. She says that she sympathizes with our situation. And how would we like to fly home on her private jet early the next morning? My mom and I could not even believe. The lady proceeds to pay for us to stay in a nice hotel that night, takes us out to dinner and buys us steaks, and flies us home on her private jet the next morning. And that is one of the best things that has ever happened to me. More of a big coincidence than anything. First week of college my junior year, sometime during the day one day I lose the dongle on my laptop charger. I look everywhere for it and can't find it anywhere. I get back to the room that night and my roommate asked how my day was. I tell him about losing the dongle and looking everywhere and he gets this weird look on his face. He looks at me and says, "Was it blackened about this long?" while holding his fingers apart. I tell him yes, but I figure he's just fricking with me. He asked did it have a yellow tip with a little white strip attached to it saying HP. I tell him yes, but I still figure he's fricking with me. He looks at me and says, "Dude, I'm so sorry, but when I was leaving the cafe this morning I see this little black thing on the sidewalk. I pick it up and start looking at it. For some reason, and I can't explain why I did it, but as I was passing the dumpster I just blurt out 'sucks for this guy' and throw it right in. He insists he wasn't freaking with me, so we put on some crappy clothes and went dumpster diving. Only took about 20 minutes to find it. Of the 2,000 plus students that attend my university, the person to find it and, like a douche, throw it away was my roommate. Dongle. Was it black and about this long while holding his fingers apart? I can see why you thought he was freaking with you. Met a pretty girl online. Meet her for coffee. I mention my birthday and she demands to see my license. Confused, I comply. Turns out we have the same birthday. More chatting. Turns out she was drum major in HS and competed against my ex-wife, who was a drum major in a school some 600 miles away, and who also had competed against her ex-husband. Also, her ex-boyfriend was dating my ex-girlfriend, which is like the third time that has happened in this city of 1.3 m. The most implausible part is we're still together almost 3 years later. I met a girl at an anime convention in Melbourne, Australia. We got on pretty well as friends. Chatted for a while on MSN, and then she decided to move to Ireland. We fell out of contact. About 3 months after she moved, I found this service that allows you to set up a crude MSN chat bot. You answer a whole heap of questions about yourself, and then if you set your MSN to away, the bot can hold a rudimentary conversation with anyone trying to speak to you. If someone does try to speak to you while you're away, a transcript is emailed to you. Bots can also chat with other bots, so you can test how well your bot responds to basic questions. One day, I get a transcript in my inbox of a bot chatting to my bot. It starts with, "How are you? I am good. What do you enjoy? I like stuff. Yada yada." But a lot of the other bot's phrases seem familiar, and when I check the bot's location, Ireland, I message the bot's owner, "Sam, is that you, Ruskin? What the frick?" Our bots had, somehow, randomly chosen each other out of the tens of thousands currently active on the site. She eventually moved back to Australia, and that random bot convo was the catalyst for us renewing our friendship. The grandfather of my then girlfriend from college awoke one morning in their house in Japan in a cold sweat. After having a horrible nightmare, he announced to his family that they were all moving back to Okinawa right then. It was the last week of July, 1945, and they were moving back to Okinawa from Hiroshima. I don't need to recall what happened that very next week. I'm pretty sure the US was dropping leaflets before dropping the bomb warning civilians to leave certain cities because bad crap was going to go down. A few years ago, I made plans to go see Nine Inch Nails in Massachusetts on their final tour with a friend of mine along with his 2 friends. We're from NY. On the trip in, the MIA song Paper Planes comes on and 3 of us start singing along, making all the noises obnoxiously, which annoyed the 4th guy, Shane. He tells us that he hates the song, which ended up being bad idea, because my friend found and purchased the single for that song, complete with 5 remixes later that day. We headed into town a couple days early, so there was plenty of annoying Shane with the song, along with making jokes about how maybe if we ask nicely Trent Reznor will play it at the concert. The day of the concert comes, and as the opening act, Street Sweeper Social Club plays their set, the singer announces this next song isn't on our album, and launches into a cover of, you guessed it, Paper Planes. It took a few moments to sink in because I really couldn't believe that it was actually happening. It was too perfect. Here we had been annoying him obnoxiously for the entire trip with this song, which the rest of us genuinely liked, for the record, only to have the opening act of the concert played out of nowhere. While visiting family in Michigan for our family reunion a few years ago, I live in California, there was a KKK rally in the small town that we were staying in. Being a young black teenager semi-flipping crap that there is an actual white supremacist rally going on, I decided to hole up in the grocery store where, coincidentally, 6 other black people, most likely everyone of color in the town, were camping out as well. I made eye contact with a guy that looked nearly exactly like me, just slightly older. He claimed to be driving through the town because he's on a road trip with his friends from Hialeah. Florida. I told him I was born there and then adopted and moved to California. He was immediately curious about the implications of how this happened, and I told him my biological mother's name and that she was too young to take care of me, so she had me adopted. After he hears this, he pulls out a picture of his mother at her high school prom. I reach for my wallet, numb with incredulity as my fingers pull free the same exact picture of this young woman. We have the same mom. We're long lost brothers. TLDR. I was stuck in a convenience store during a KKK rally in a random town and found my long lost brother of 16 years. And then you beat up all the xenophobes back to back. Back in 2006, my brother and I were in Berlin, just dicking around, when these two Russian girls asked out us in Russian. Confused, we replied in English, nothing. Then in German, and turns out they just wanted someone to take their picture. We oblige, then get talking and hang out the rest of the day. After dinner we say goodbye and part ways. Fast forward to 2010. I'm using Livemecha to learn Russian, and out of boredom, I click the link to review English submissions. I find one of a girl practicing ordering food in a restaurant. I see the display picture and think this girl's hot. Click her profile and I am like, okay, this girl looks really freaking familiar. I sent her a message and we start exchanging this and that. Well, don't you know it? It's the same freaking girl from Berlin. We got together over the summer in Holland and I think she's the one. Till Livemecha. Thanks. I've heard many different versions of this story, most of them based in Amsterdam and people thinking that little people children were trolls gremlins. She was my secret tip savior. I used to deliver food for a local restaurant and I was the only driver that worked nights. This restaurant gets most of its business from the lunch crowd. It was the day after Thanksgiving and I was having an especially crappy night week. I had been up to my elbows in deliveries, with tipping being a rare thing. It was also looking like I might be about $150 or so short on my rent. I was literally one smart comment away from flipping my crap all over the customers and quitting. Flash forward to one of my last deliveries of the night and it's an hour past what time I was supposed to be off. The snow is turning into steam as soon as the flakes reach my personal bubble. I walk up to the house, ring the doorbell and hear the shrieking call of the indigenous 8-year-old boys of Swahili. I curse my luck and try to keep my cool as two young boys run around me in circles shooting each other with toy guns. I remember her smiling at me and mouthing I am sorry. I give her the food and she hands me exact change. I curse the gods of the service industry. But just when all hope was lost, I heard one of her little boys asking if he could give me my tip. The kid runs off, leaving me standing there in the cold and snow, pee off and hating my life while the lady tries to make small talk. I try to be nice but I just want to rip her face off. The little boy shows up with 3 crisp $100 bills in his tiny hand. I was not amused at this joke. I tell the lady it looks like her boy grabbed the wrong bills. She said number. She smiled, said don't tell anyone, winked, told me Merry Christmas and shut the door, leaving me standing out in the cold and feeling sort of like a Jehovah's Witness. I was in a mixed state of shock, happiness, and rage over the fact that I hate when people say Merry Christmas while it's still November. I quietly drove back to the store, took my last delivery, cleaned up, and went home. I mention this to no one because I wouldn't let their greedy hands get a share of my rent money. A few weeks later the same lady orders and I send a newly hired driver to her house. I got promoted a week after. He comes back with a $50 tip and is flipping crap. I smile because my secret tip lady has a heart of gold. TLDR. Lady gives me $300 as a tip for a delivery. I tell no one. I make rent with the help of a random stranger whom I never met before. When I was about 10 I traveled to Newfoundland where I made one friend who was the same age as me. I was only there for a week and left to come back home. Fast forward 10 years, without any contact between us. I'm waiting outside my classroom for the previous class to finish, and who walks out? Yeah, the one friend I had made 10 years ago. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.